great attorney, works very hard, and he had no idea why. But at the end of the day, after working for 9 hours, he might have 3 or 3.5 hours billed, and he had no idea. So he began by tracking his day and seeing where his time actually went. And we started using the triangle system. And that day he went from 3 or 4 hours of billable time average to 10.3 hours in a 9-hour day. And that sounds intense, but he said, this was the easiest day I've ever had. This really worked. I feel more comfortable, I feel more relaxed, but mostly I feel productive, I feel efficient.
Welcome to the Free Lawyer Podcast. I'm your host, Gary Miles.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you guys had just a fantastic weekend. So think about this scenario. It's 7:30 p.m. You're still at your desk. You're surrounded by open files, and most of all, you're completely exhausted. You've been working nonstop since 7 a.m., but when you check your billable hours, they just don't add up. They just don't add up. Where did the time go? Does that sound familiar? You know, I've lived that story for years, drowning in files, working like a hamster, driving myself crazy, and watching precious billable hours slip away. But here's the good news. I've discovered a way out. Today I'm going to share exactly how I transformed my practice from chaos to control, boosted my billable hours, and reclaimed my evenings, all while delivering better work to my clients. It isn't theory. This is a system that actually works. It's worked for me and dozens of other attorneys I've coached. So stay with me, because this could be the most valuable 15 minutes of your professional life. I remember so well when I was in my active practice, how hard I seemed to work. I would go from one file right into the next, not taking a break. Calls would come in and I'd take them. I'd get an email from that challenging attorney and I'd look at it and I'd answer it. And I never seemed to get finished on what I started. And at the end of the day, I didn't know where my time had went. It was gone. And it just didn't add up. The amount of hours I worked, the intensity with which I worked, and the amount of billable time I had, it didn't match up. Have you ever felt that way? You know, so often for so many of us, there's a real disconnect between the number of hours we've worked and the number of hours we've billed. And it creates such frustration for us because our effort is so intense, we're so dedicated, we're trying so hard, but our results are completely underwhelming. And this brings me to the problem of what I call busyness. You know, busyness is not what we're striving for. We're striving for true productivity. And when we're constantly allow ourselves to be interrupted, to have folks stop in our office and ask us just that quick question, which ends up taking 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and then we've lost track of where we are. And then that call comes in and we interrupt again. They completely undermine our productivity. And when we react to one call, one email, can I ask you a quick question after another, our productivity, our effectiveness is completely undermined. How many of you have ever collapsed into your chair at the end of the day, exhausted from your nonstop work, only to find your billable hours are mysteriously and inexplicably low? And my revelation came when I decided one day to track everything I did that day, literally everything, from the time I sat down at my desk until the time I wrapped up for the evening. And I learned where my time was actually going. My problem was answered, because so often I didn't know where I was going. And I talked to a lot of lawyers about this problem, and they say, I don't know how I work so hard and I only bill 2 or 3 or 4 hours. I don't know where my time goes. And that's the problem. They don't know where their time goes. And this is so critical. You know, feeling busy, working so hard, simply is not the same as being productive. And the first step for you, the most important step, the essential precondition to being more productive, is being aware of how you spend your time. Are you working and not recording your time billed? Do you allow yourself to be distracted by your cell phone or the internet? Do you get too many interruptions? And there are so many in what I call invisible time thieves, switching from one task to another without really giving focused work to the first, allowing ourselves to be interrupted by our assistant or our partner or our associate in the office, or to be interrupted by phone calls or emails, or to work on a file and actually do the work but forget to record it. And then at the end of the day or the end of the week, we don't remember what we actually did. And so often our biggest problem is multitasking. We not only lose time during the interruption, but we lose time trying to refocus. Where was I on this pleading? What was my thought process? What was I going to say next? We lose all that. We lose our focus and we have to back up and start over. And the simple tracking method of spending a week every day, writing down from the day you get to the office until the time you leave, each and everything you do, even walking down the hall to get a cup of coffee and chatting with another attorney, whatever it might be. And then analyzing what it shows. Were you wasting too much time talking about things that weren't important? Were you working and not billing your time? And, when we have that multitasking, when we're constantly interrupted, it's pretty darn hard to figure out how much time we spent on the underlying project because we had the conversation, the phone call, the email, we lost track of where we were. How much time do we actually work on it? We don't know. So this method of tracking your time comprehensively from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, literally a chronological record of what you did each day, is a huge first step in becoming more productive. Because all too often, the overworked attorney does not know where his time went. He does not know why, when he got home at the end of the day, when he worked 10 hours, he only had 3 or 4 hours on his timesheet, and the work he wanted to get done didn't get done. And this will give you that initial answer. So how do we become more efficient? How do we get more done more effectively so we're more productive and we're more fulfilled and we're more satisfied? The first step is tonight, plan your tomorrow. Spend 15 minutes figuring out what are the most important things that you have to do. What are the ones that you really should get done that are both urgent and critical, and you need to get them done? Analyze what you have and prioritize what needs to be done first tomorrow. And then plan your day. Plan what you're going to work on when, and prepare yourself mentally for tomorrow's success. I'll bet you and hardly any lawyer listening to this spends 10 to 15 minutes at the close of one day actually planning what he's going to do tomorrow. What are the most important things to do? But it's a critical first step. And then when you get to the office in the morning, revisit that plan and pick the thing that is hardest for you to do, the one file you don't want to do, the one file that is distasteful or difficult or challenging or unpleasant or whatever. Pick that hard file. The one we keep putting off. And I used to do this all the time. I'd have that motion for summary judgment, which was so challenging and raised such thorny issues that I had to answer, but I wanted to get ready to answer it by cleaning my desk. I'd handle all the other small, relatively insignificant, relatively simple matters first, so that when I had all them done, then I could give devoted time to that big project. But you know what that really was? That was procrastination. Because so often we put aside the most important thing, the hardest thing, the most important thing, the most critical thing. We put that aside because we don't feel like dealing with it. We make up some story or some excuse why that makes sense. But if you tackle your biggest, hardest file first, you work on it without interruption, completely focused from 9 to 10, say, without interruption, your door's closed, no one comes in, no, you don't take any calls, you don't answer any emails, you turn off your phone and you just focus on it for an hour. At the end of that hour, you will both have gotten a lot of work done, but you'll feel really, really good about your success and making progress on that file that you had been ignoring for so long. It's a huge psychological boost to you and your psyche. And it's also allowed you to work on that file in an efficient way and at the time when you're sharpest and most on your ball. When you start working on your files, I have what I call the triangle system. So often we just pick the file up, we start working on it, we may get interrupted, we finish, call comes in, we grab the next file, and nothing is very orderly. So when you're going to work on a certain file, there are 3 steps of what you should do. The first is before you start working on it, review the file in your computer system, in your case management system. Make sure you know the history. Quickly check the recent emails and your notes of phone calls. And make sure you understand what the background is of the file and where it is at its present time. And see for the project you're doing if there are any resources you need. Do you need any cases? Do you need to grab some of the exhibits? Make sure you have handy whatever you need to work on that file. And now that you've reviewed it, now that you have your materials ready, you're prepared to work on it. So the second phase is your focused work phase. Undivided attention. No interruptions. It may only be 15 minutes, but no interruptions. And document what you're doing in your case management system while you're doing it. Record exactly what you're doing and why in some detail, and write a narrative that will make sense to your client when they get the bill. And then the final stage is the closure protocol. Pre-work, then focus work, then we're closing the file. Make your final entries in the system of what happened and what's done. Make a choice about what needs to be done next. What's the next stage in the case? Update your case management system with a diary or a tickler or a calendar, whatever you may call it, to look at that file on a certain date to handle that next step in the case. And then see yourself mentally closing a physical file, opening a cabinet, and putting the file in the cabinet, and then spend 15, maybe 30 seconds just closing your eyes, realizing you're done with that file, it's closed, and prepare yourself for the next file. And these 3 stages work together great to create a seamless workflow. You know what you need to do. You have reviewed the file, so you're prepared to handle it. You have all the materials you need to do it. You focus on it. You make contemporaneous narratives and time entries. You diary ahead what's going to come next and when you need to see the file the next time or look at it. You plan your next step in the case, and then you close it. And it's very, very efficient. And each file is segregated. Each file is handled with efficiency and productivity. It's billed contemporaneously with a great time entry. Another thing is, how do we optimize our hours during the day? So the first is handle your most difficult matters when you're mentally your sharpest. What are your most complex tasks? And when are you best prepared to handle them? For most of us, it's first thing in the morning. And one thing I'd caution you about, I've worked with some attorneys who the first thing they did in the morning was go to the coffee room and talk with the other attorneys, then sit down and do a quick check of social media and check and see what the news of the day is, and then they get ready to work. And by the time they've done that, they've wasted 30 or 45 minutes. You don't need a break when you first get to the office. But when you first get to the office, dive right into that file that last night you planned you were going to do first. Dive right into it. Work on it for an hour. And then take your break. Then take your break. Go to the coffee room, grab a glass of water, walk around the hall, maybe even step outside and get some fresh air. Take your break after you worked on that complex file. And then handle the things that happened while you were working on that. Look at the emails that came in during that hour and answer them. See what calls might have come in and return them. See who in your office tried to see you during that hour of focus work and get back to them and answer their questions. And the one thing I've learned is I would answer every phone call when it came in. And most lawyers are like that. You're working and the phone rings, you answer it when you're at your desk. But you don't have to. The person who's calling doesn't know you're sitting there waiting for their call. They don't know at all. So I believe with our clients, it's much more efficient to say, I'm available for telephone calls between 10:30 and 11:30 in the morning and 2:30 and 3:30 in the afternoon. Clients understand that and they appreciate that. And if they call you before that, call them back at 10:30, whatever time window you set. And I found that clients actually prefer that. And we've been trained that way with other service providers, with our doctor, with me, with our vet. I know if I need to speak to her, there's a certain time of day I can call. And clients will absolutely accept that. And it's so much more efficient for you than interrupting everything you're doing to take that client call. And then take strategic breaks during the day. After that intense file you worked on first, take a break. Take a break for lunch. And I would encourage not just sitting at your desk and reading or looking at the internet, because that's still wearing down your brain. Go outside, get some fresh air, or walk around the hall and find your friend that you like to chat with, your best associate in the office, and chat with him or her a bit, or meet someone for lunch. And then after you work for a while in the afternoon, maybe 2 hours, take a break in the afternoon. And you'll find that really helps. And at the end of the day, see yourself closing your files and putting them back in the drawer. Look at your timesheet and see if it reflects the time you actually worked. If you're in that stage where you did what I suggested and you've been tracking all your time during the day, see if there's anything you worked on that you forgot to bill. Or sometimes you can see it in your case management system, that this file was worked on, but you didn't record any time for it. And then spend that 15 minutes, and we're completing the cycle now, planning your next day. So how do we implement this process? Well, I would suggest start step by step. Begin for a week with just doing your evening planning. And then next week, start with your morning victory formula, planning the hardest thing you want to do and tackling it first. And you'll find that that's really efficient. And you may say to me, but Gary, that all sounds well and good. That sounds like a well-oiled machine, but this crisis happens and that crisis happens. Absolutely. There are things you have to push ahead, be at the forefront, because they're on fire, they're emergencies, something has to be done. Absolutely. You have to adapt to those emergencies. But don't abandon this plan. Just get back on track once the emergency is dealt with. And I don't expect you to implement this and find it goes perfectly in the beginning, but it really is progress over perfection. And you'll find you have more billable hours in less time. You'll find that you encounter so much less stress in your day. You will have peace of mind from knowing that nothing is falling through the cracks. Your relationships with your clients will improve because you'll be in a better mental state. You'll be handling their calls timely. And even though I say don't take them all when they first come in, do make sure you return every call within 24 hours, if not sooner. They'll find they're getting better quality work from you and that you're actually more responsive. And maybe most importantly, you'll have better work-life balance. Your billable hours will be so much higher during the week. You'll be so much more productive, so much more efficient, and you will have time to reclaim your evenings and weekends. I coached one of my clients on this. Great attorney, works very hard, and he had no idea why, but at the end of the day, after working for 9 hours, he might have 3 or 3.5 hours billed, and he had no idea. So we began by tracking his day and seeing where his time actually went. And we started using the triangle system of reviewing what he was doing in the beginning, doing the work, and then closing it, and making great contemporaneous notes, and diarying the file for when he wanted it. He followed this system. And that day he went from 3 or 4 hours of billable time average to 10.3 hours in a 9-hour day. And that sounds intense, but he said, this was the easiest day I've ever had. This really worked. I feel more comfortable. I feel more relaxed, but mostly I feel productive. I feel efficient. So it really, really works. You became a lawyer to make a difference. You didn't become a lawyer to drown in paperwork and be overwhelmed by stress. And the system I shared today isn't just about productivity. It's about reclaiming your passion for the law and for your life beyond it. The journey from chaos to control begins with a single step. So tonight, take 15 minutes to plan your tomorrow and commit to tracking your time. You don't need to implement everything at once. Start small, but start today. Your future self and your family will thank you for it. If you're ready to transform your practice, I invite you to schedule a complimentary consultation. Let's turn your practice into the success story that you have always envisioned. Thank you so much for listening to me today. I appreciate each and every one of you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Free Lawyer Podcast. Wherever you are listening, if you enjoyed what I shared, please leave me a rating and review. I would appreciate hearing more about what you like best and what topics you might like me to cover in future episodes. If you are interested in experiencing a more fulfilling and a more successful life, please contact me at www.garymiles.net, where you can schedule a free discovery call with me so I can learn more about you, your challenges, and your dreams. I appreciate each and every one of you and have a great rest of your day. Thanks to all of you for your support.